Close brace. For JavaScript developers, by JavaScript developers. Welcome back to 5 Minute React. I've got a cold this week, so it's very possible that by the end of this video I'm going to sound like some grizzled action hero fresh from the front lines of battle. Now switch over to Sublime Text and prepare to hew the heads of many orcs. Anyway, after a brief foray into optimization, it's time to make our login page log a user in. Well, time to get started anyway. There's a lot of code to cover here, and it's going to take multiple tutorials before we can see anything really happening. I try as often as possible to end these tutorials by giving you something that actually works, but that's probably not going to happen here. Sorry. Let's jump in. First off, we need to add 2 lines to make our new Babel-friendly Webpack config file work in development mode. So open up app.js in Sublime Text, and at the very top add the following. Now change line 17 from require webpack.config to require webpack.config.babel. Save this file. Switch to a terminal window or command prompt. If your server's still running in production mode, kill that. Mine's not. Then type the following. Yarn add babel-register whatwg-fetch. That second module adds a polyfill for fetch so that we can be sure it'll work on lots of browsers. It should work without the fill on reasonably current versions of Chrome and Firefox, and maybe Microsoft Edge. You may not have heard the term polyfill before, but you've probably used one or two in your life. Polyfills are basically pieces of JavaScript that enable new features in older browsers that don't support them natively. They do this by basically duplicating the feature in JavaScript that the browser does support. This particular polyfill is for the newish fetch specification, which is basically a built-in way for browsers to do AJAX requests without needing to install a framework like jQuery or write your own set of tools. We're going to use it to send requests to our API. It's easy to use, easy to read, and works really well with async await. Now that everything's installed, we can fire up our development server with nodemon yarn start. We're a ways away from actually sending a request to our API yet. We've got code to write. Let's do it. Switch over to Sublime again, and open up /routes/API/authentication.js. We're making one quick tweak to our API due to a quirk in Passport, the module we use to authenticate users. Passport is built to take a username and password. This username can be an email or any other value, but you still have to call it username, which is confusing. Also, if you do that, it locks you into email-only logins rather than supporting username or email logins. We want to have the latter available, though we're not going to set it up right now. And we also don't want to have a variable called username which contains an email instead of, well, a username. So our API is going to have to do a bit of trickery. When we submit our login form, which will contain an email and password, we're going to look up the user associated with the email address, get their username, and submit that to Passport, along with the password, instead of the email address. Below line 1, add the following code. Const mongoose equals require mongoose. Below line 6, add a line of padding, and then add the following. This will prevent some warnings from Mongoose about using its deprecated built-in promise system. You could use any number of promise libraries here, but the default one's fine for our purposes and doesn't require us to load any further modules, so just go with that. Now swing down to the top of the login block, which should be line 27 if your spacing matches mine. We need to make this function work with async await, so the first step is to add async to line 28, like this. Just under that line, add the following. As you can see, we're awaiting our database query and then going ahead and adding the username to our login packet before sending it to Passport, if it exists. If the user lookup fails, no big thing. No username will be added to Passport, and the login attempt will fail as it should. We'll display a generic login incorrect error when that happens. You never want to alert a user specifically that an email or username was actually found, but the password is wrong, because if the login attempt is coming from a hacker, that encourages them to continue trying passwords for what they now know is an existing account. Alright, we're set here. Save this file, and then create a new file in /source/components/account called loginpagecontainer.jsx. Capital L, capital P, capital C. This is where we're going to handle the logic that actually talks to the API, while login page will remain a dumb component that just receives props. I said in an earlier tutorial that we might end up using a module called redux-thunk to help with asynchronous actions. As it turns out, yes, we're going to get there, but not yet. First, we're going to put our logic in our container. Then in a couple of tutorials, I'll show you how to get async actions working, including explaining what thunks are, and move the connections to the API from component file to action file. This is a bit cleaner, especially in large applications. Remember how I told you this tutorial was going to end up with nothing really working yet? Yeah, sorry again. We're getting close to the 5-minute mark, and the next step would take us into 8 or 9 minutes, so let's just stop here. We'll fill in login page container.jsx and make some changes to login page.jsx in our next tutorial. That'll get us to the point where we can see something actually happening. Then in the following tutorial, we'll handle actually doing something once a successful login attempt occurs. See you there.